Welcome to CPC Polished Concrete Specification Basics AIA course conference call. My name is Sylvia and I will be operating for today's call. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Please note that this conference is being recorded. I will now turn the call over to Jennifer Fowler. Jennifer, you may begin.
Hello. Thanks for joining me for Polished Concrete Specification Basics. This is designed to help all of you feel more comfortable when doing this presentation to architects and designers. Some of the things that I talk about on the second slide is the fact that we do have soft goods, meaning our carpet, as well as hard goods of our polished concrete, and that in many cases tile is used in the same place as hard surfaces, and people are not as used to specifying polished concrete with another soft surface, so that it is a very, very doable thing. On this slide, I talk about how we have multi-use here, and that we have a cafe as well as we have a retail space. That we have multiple colors, that in this case we're using design. We've put terrazzo strips in, and it's gotten polished. So it can be a very decorative piece for an entryway as well as utilitarian. These saw cuts were done specifically to give this a unique design and to go along with window frames that are up to your right. The American Society of Concrete Contractors about a year ago talked to the Concrete Polishing Association, and together we made a decision to join the American Society of Concrete Contractors, as we all know. We believe that this is very important because the ASCC is the largest nonprofit for slab construction, and being a member of this association has given us quite a bit of credibility. We're one of the bunch here. We're the Polishing Council. We also have the Manufacturers Council and the Safety and Risk and the Decorative Council, all part of the American Society for Concrete Contractors. And usually here I'll also encourage architects or designers that if they're doing a lot of work with designing and concrete construction, they may consider joining the American Society of Concrete Contractors. We have members consisting in many different areas, contractors, associate members, and professionals. And the CPAA started in 2009, and like I said, has now been kind of encapsulated within the American Society of Concrete Contractors. We've come a long way, and our mission is to still provide standards, education, and professional networks for the polished concrete industry. And that is our purpose in the design industry. So if there's questions regarding polished concrete, a very good resource for you is always calling the Concrete Polishing Council to get your answers. The purpose of the CPC, and again, is developing that industry specification and standard and really being the go-to organization for our architects and design people moving forward. What you see here, which is kind of interesting, is this is an industrial space, and this floor used to have an industrial epoxy on it. That was completely removed. Therefore, you are seeing some of the Class C aggregate exposure. And this was done with some PVC lines. So these were not line stripes with an epoxy overword. It was a beveled PVC line that was basically applied by a heavyweight roller and they use the laser to do this installation. It's a very easy way to do this, and as far as moving forward, this can really is a game changer for how quickly you can open up an area. So now not only is it quick after we polish the floor, but it's also quick when the lines are applied. There's no waiting, there's no wet floor happening here. This course is accredited and will be able to provide CEU credits. So just make sure that people are doing the sign-in sheet and we're returning that back to Jill or Todd. Learning objectives. These are the most important things that I spend some time on. Understand the need to coordinate specifications. So there's the 033000 cast in place, and that's where the concrete contractors are reading this document, and then they're doing their bids. And generally speaking, the 033543 is what our industry reads, the polished concrete specification. And the way that it started was that the cast in place spec would be read by the concrete contractor. We would read the polished concrete, and neither one would read the other person's specification. And that caused many problems that over the years caused that finger pointing back and forth. And one of the things that has happened recently is with the ASCC coming into view is there's now a consideration about that, which is this other specification number that something in process. It's a work in process, but look forward to seeing this in the next year or so, that the 033001 will give you some guide towards concrete that's going to receive a polish. And then what we need to make sure is we refer in the cast in place and the polish to this particular specification. So in this case, there's no way that we won't be missing out on finding any information out, whether it's about how the concrete's going to be poured or the fact that it's going to be polished. We're going to spend some time on defining polished concrete because there are many different thoughts about what polished concrete is. Is it just simply shiny concrete? Or is there something that we need to know more about it, and what is that? Stressing the importance of pre-construction meetings, which I think all of us that are on this particular presentation know, but it's important to let the specifiers and or architects know that it's important to include the polishing contractor in that pre-construction meeting when they're writing the specification. So list our name as well. And we're going to talk about utilizing our glossary of the Concrete Polishing Council's glossary, and the more times that they can use specific industry terminology in their specification, that then there is a reference point of our glossary, is really something to their advantage, because then no longer is this thing subjective, what does that really mean? Now it actually has a definition. And we'll talk a little bit about the fact of what initial grinding is, and the fact that we do actually need to be using certain words, and one of them is grinding in our specification. And finally, the sequencing of a project and things that they should be thinking about when making some ideas on scheduling. So why use polished concrete? I think everybody listening here knows, but one of the things for me is this permanent flooring solution, and the fact that there's no removal and there's no replacement. There may be a slight repolish or refurbish, but there won't be a removal or a replacement. And any new product that a new tenant would decide to use can be applied directly on top of our product, assuming the surface is clean and profiled. And everybody in this room pretty much knows that we have a sustainable product, so I don't spend a lot of time on that at this point. I think it almost makes us seem like we're talking down to our architectural community. The low maintenance, I do believe, is important that people know that it is low maintenance, not a no maintenance system, and that it is breathable. So if an architect or specifier is planning to produce a project where they already know that moisture could be an issue, this is a good choice for them to use. And flatter, smoother floors is something that we'll talk a lot about moving forward. And low life cycle cost is absolutely one excellent reason to choose polished concrete, and we'll get into that further as we move along. Specifying the concrete. Again, there's the cast in place, and then we have this new area that we're going to be working on that will start to really help the specifier, engineer, designers in how to choose their mixed designs, what to use regular lightweight concrete, what's going to happen if they do one or the other, the slab and grade or elevated. These things all will be things that need to be defined when looking in this specification, and they will help out tremendously in making sure that our projects turn out well. This is just an example of some of the data coming out in the industry overall. This was in one of the industry magazines that the people in the room that you will be speaking to will already know and get this into their offices, the CSI specifier. And it just points to the validity of where we're moving to. Mixed design and finishing suggestions. We also do have these on our website, CPC website, and we would be glad if they need information to have any one of them call either the CPC and or one of us if they're familiar with one of us, and we can help them with the finishing suggestions. Floor flatness is very important and needs to be considered when making decisions on both the amount of aggregate reveal as well as the clarity of that slab in the end. And we'll show that as we move forward when we get to those two charts. Flatness benefits. Some of the things that are very important, why that they need to be spending time thinking about this is that initial cut. That initial cut is the foundation of the polishing process, just like the foundation when they're building a building is the most important thing they do in order for their building to come out uniform. With this initial cut, it is the most important with a flat floor in order to get a uniform aggregate exposure. And floors are going to more evenly, and we're going to get increased durability, and I think many people are choosing polished concrete as a go-to hard surface floor for that reason, that there's less wear and we're getting increased durability. So I think it's important that you kind of touch on a few of these. Specifying the polished concrete, which is different than specifying the concrete construction. One of the things you'll see here is that this is a very flat floor. It is a hybrid polish, if you do want to mention that, and it is a medium level shine. The definition of polished concrete, the act of changing a floor surface with or without aggregate exposure to achieve a specified appearance level. So this is very important because it's the changing of a floor surface that makes this polished concrete, because these diamonds actually are removing part of that surface. That is a permanent change of the floor from that point forward. Differently than if a epoxy is applied to a floor or a wax is applied to a floor. When the wax or the epoxy is removed, maybe chemically, the floor is still the floor. So this is something that really stands out to make a difference in the changing a floor surface. It's really the key to it being polished concrete. And you're going to see moving forward that polished concrete does not have to actually be shiny. Concrete, as we all kind of see it in a warehouse or in our garage in our house, has kind of almost a skin on the surface, and it looks fairly uniform. If it's been hard troweled, then it's a darker gray. But once that's removed, what we're going to see underneath it is that there are large and small aggregate and fine aggregate, which is also what you would call sand. And what happens when a grind happens is that we basically are removing this skin, and the deeper we grind, the larger the aggregate exposure typically we're going to get. Of course, keep in mind that if there is not a piece of aggregate this size in this slab, there's no way we're going to be able to ever reveal a large aggregate. So if all we had were these smaller ones here, we would only be able to ever achieve a smaller aggregate exposure. And that's very important to understand when designing this. The other part about that is if they do want large aggregate, they maybe even want to choose their specific aggregate they're going to be putting into this mixed design, and that's something that absolutely can be done, and then they will be able to dictate getting a 1/2 inch aggregate or getting a 3/4 inch aggregate. The polished concrete process, this is just quick. The architectural community doesn't really need to know this, but I just kind of go over it very quickly. That what's happening is we're taking that skin or film that's on that surface, we're grinding that off, we're starting to basically reveal the aggregate that's underneath that skin on that surface. We do apply a densifier. That densifier is a product that penetrates in, does not leave a film on the surface. And then we continue the process by bringing starting to bring the floor up to a little bit of a shine. And then the polishing is what actually gives you the reflectivity. Sometimes there will be a stain-resistant product that is used to help with things like oil or food stains. And at that point, the concrete process will be complete, and it would be open to vehicular traffic and or foot traffic if the building was in that place and could do that at that point. And this just shows some actual photos of the process. What I like to point out here is that it is a full scratch pattern, and it is very rough at this stage, in the grinding stage. And as we move into the polish, it gets smoother and there's more reflectivity until we get to a higher level of polish. And again, this is a higher level polish, but concrete does not need to be shiny in order to be polished concrete. This is an interesting slide to go over because a lot of people are like, how do we get concrete to really be light reflective? And the answer is we start with those big grit diamonds, and we're making very large valleys in the floor. And when light comes down, it bounces between these valleys, and then very little light will actually come up, and therefore very little reflection will come up. As we get into a less deep, you can see that the valley is shallower, and this diamond is also cutting off the tops of the surfaces, so we're getting that so we're in essence getting rid of the scratch pattern before it, and there's starting to be some places that are flatter where we're able to get some light reflectivity. And finally, when you're in a higher level polish, at that point, all of the diamond grit has, in essence, removed all of this area. The whole surface, the scratches are so refined that it feels flat to your touch. And at that point in time, we're going to be able to get that near finish. This is just another image of the same basic idea: light source, polished concrete that's refined very well. and therefore we're going to get some reflection happening. And when a reflection is measured, that's where that 60-degree angle is right here. That's what's referred to that's more for our polishers, so you guys understand that, but you really don't need to explain that to the architects. Maximum refinement, the point in time when the diamond tool has refined the surface to the degree to which it no longer cuts or cuts very little under its current weight and variables as defined by the CPC. So if we think about that, what we're saying here is that the reason why it's going to cut very little is because we've cut off every single top of every area. Whether it's this where we've cut off all of it, but even in each grit, as long as we don't leave some peaks and valleys, at that point we're going to basically achieve that full or maximum refinement where there's no ability to, or very little is going to be being removed any longer. And when I'm talking to the architects, what I really talk about is this, that maximum refinement, even if they just use that word in there, in the specification, that will yield them a better chance of full clarity or uniform shine. It will give them the ability to get a more abrasion or wear-resistant floor, a flatter floor, and safer floors. Burnished polished concrete is one of 3 different types of polished concrete. And all these definitions are listed in the glossary, and they are word for word able to be inserted into a specification in order to get a specific result. And this is a multi-stop operation. There's a frictional rubbing, basically, which is diamond powders, basically, that are mixed with a resinous product and is put on the bottom of a pad. And those diamonds do actually scratch, and therefore they are changing that surface. And at that point, they will be able to, as you go from grit to grit, will also allow that concrete to shine to whichever level you are interested in. As far as what the architect needs to know, this process will not expose aggregate. It will not expose fine aggregate. So the choice here is if they want a floor that can have some shine, not have a sealer on top, and be densified to rejection, so it's highly durable. That's why somebody would use this product. This is an example. Hybrid polished concrete, the way I explain this is it's taking those diamond impregnated pads and some of our heavyweight equipment and using them in combination. And what happens here is now because we also do use some heavier weighted equipment or some equipment that can actually remove that top crust or seal of the surface, we will be able to get some aggregate reveal. Whereas in the burnished polished concrete, there's no possibility of aggregate reveal. Also, because we're doing a little bit of the aggregate reveal, what's happening is we're able to get rid of some of the highs that are on the concrete naturally. And the flatter we get that floor, the more durable the floor is going to be. And that's why we're saying that hybrid polished concrete has better durability. It also is densified, so they're going to get good durability on all 3 of these processes. And this is a hybrid. And you can see that now this floor is a little flatter, and they're getting a little bit more true reflectivity of some of the different features in this particular building. And last which is what most people are used to thinking of polished concrete, is called bonded abrasive polished concrete. And it does give you the best durability. And I will then reach back to what I was saying previously was about maximum refinement. So in this particular system, we're using a more heavy-weighted machine, 3-headed counter-rotating machine, which I'll show you in a minute a picture of. And it is able to do the best job of maximum refinement, which means then that when the light comes down, it's going to be able to bounce back up uniformly. And by having it bounce back up uniformly, we're going to be able to produce a reflective surface that will give you a true straight line because it's uniformly reflecting. And this, again, is a multi-step operation. And it is also using a densification process to rejection, which will give it high durability. Bonded abrasive concrete, what I usually say here is that these machines can do large format work or small work, and bonded abrasive polished concrete is really the only one that's going to be able to give you the Class C reveal of coarse aggregate. This is more for fun architects. I just like to show you what we use here. So on the left, you can see that it's this is the bottom of a piece of equipment that we work called a grinder, and the large satellite in the bottom is moving in from left to right, and the smaller heads are moving from right to left. So, and as these both spin around, it's very similar to a teacup ride at the at a carnival. And what's happening here is because of the counter rotation, these diamonds, these are called metal diamonds, metal bond diamonds, and these are resinous and or hybrid diamonds. And what these will do is basically all of this different, it's creating a geometry pattern underneath the floor, and that is going to allow for full or maximum refinement with this piece of equipment here. One of the things we had to do when we first started in this industry is really define what polished concrete was not. And that's because there was a lot of confusion, not only telling people what it is, but what isn't it. And one of the things it is not is surface-coated concrete. So if we take a surface and simply put a clear sealer on and it dries and now it's shiny and it looks all glossy, it's not polished concrete because we didn't do anything to change that surface here. We simply applied a product that could be removed with maybe a chemical removal, and this floor could, in essence, be back to what it looked like before. So it does not conform to the definition of polished concrete per the Concrete Polishing Council. Specifying items to consider. I don't spend a lot of time on this slide. I do illustrate a couple things. The function of the floor, generally speaking, we don't need a high level shine in areas that are going to be high maintenance floors because it's going to require more maintenance on a regular basis. We do, I will also sometimes mention that the floor is slip resistant, and we do have research to talk about that, so that's not as big of an issue as people may have thought in the past as far as what the floor function is. However, things like design, I'll use an example of early on, we designed a university, and the architect wanted to use polished concrete everywhere, in the hallways as well as in the classrooms. And they did that, but what they didn't do is design for any sort of sound absorption. And the first year that that particular university was open in that building, it was a big problem because it was so noisy in the hallways. Many of the classrooms couldn't hear the professors. So they had to install a bunch of other sound absorption, secondary sound absorption. Those are things just that are important to think about when making decisions about using polished concrete. This is a big choice. This is one of the three choices you're really going to be making as an architect or a specifier. And the first one is, and this is assuming you have a new slab that's being poured. If you have an existing slab in an older existing building that's a remodel, this slide really does not, it's not important because you're not going to be able to choose the aggregate reveal. And that's because the concrete's already been placed. And there's no way for a polished concrete contractor to know where the cement fines are or the large or small aggregate or even how large the aggregate is in that slab, as we talked about earlier. So it's not very possible for you to tell a polisher that you want a certain class of reveal. However, if you're in new concrete, that's a different story. So there's cement fines, which basically means that you're not seeing the sand, okay? And what we're looking at is a Class A cement fine. 85 to 90% of that floor, you're not really going to see that sand speckle. Only between 5 and 15% you may see that little bit of that sand speckle, or maybe even a little bit larger piece of aggregate that may be around a column or maybe around a joint where the concrete may have curled a bit. Fine aggregate, Class B, what I say about this is it's really the most specified and the easiest concrete for the polisher to be able to really put together and process. And that will give them a highly durable surface because we now have exposure of sand on 85 to 95% of the surface, and there's cement fines and or coarser aggregate revealed, but only up to 15%. Everywhere a piece of fine aggregate is revealed, that sand has a starting and a stopping point, and you can see that visually with your eye. And that visualization with your eye, there is a gap where the sand and then the small cement matrix meet. Every single one of those very minute gaps that we really can't see with our naked eye is going to do two things. One, it's going to create more coefficient of friction or traction for a tire and or foot traffic. The other thing it's going to do is each one of those little pieces of sand are highly durable. Sand's actually more durable than, or it's a rock. And in essence, the rock part of concrete is actually more durable than the cement matrix. And so when a little bit of that reveal can be of either the sand or the coarse aggregate, you're actually going to get an even more durable floor than you would if you are just exposing cement fines. And this is an example of a cement fine floor. This floor does require high FF numbers, so high amount of flatness. And what that means to you is that when you're speaking with that engineer that has that cast-in-place specification written, it is very important for you to emphasize that, so that that's one part of a way that we can help get a flatter floor and therefore a more uniform cement fine polish for you. It doesn't guarantee, but it certainly will be helpful. This is when I was talking about the fine aggregate, and you can see each one of these little pieces here is a piece of sand. And again, you have the start and stop everywhere, as well as the sand is now exposed. And when it's exposed, it is basically a flat rock surface that will be highly durable. And lastly, of the three classes, the Class C is showing that coarse aggregate. So the coarse aggregate can be smaller or larger, and that's going to depend solely upon what's in that slab before we get there. And that's the very big thing I like to mention when I'm speaking to the design community, is that we can't reveal what wasn't put in the slab to begin with. So if they're looking for a certain reveal, they need to start from scratch with the engineer and the mix design. These are just some examples of burnished concrete. A random exposure, so this is where I was talking about if you start with an existing slab, excuse me, I apologize. When you start with an existing slab, you may get some cream, you may get some coarse aggregate, and you may get some of the little bit of fines where you have the cement. So this would be a Class A, maybe a Class B, and a Class C, all on the same floor. Same thing here. You can see Class A, probably somewhere in here you're getting Class B, and then you're going to get a Class C right here. All on the same floor within maybe a foot or two of each other. And that's common and normal for existing slabs. And we call that random exposure. And recently I've been even encouraging people to put in the words random exposure into their specification, because that tells a polisher a lot. That tells the polisher and it tells the general contractor that's overseeing what we're doing that that's going to be something that they expect to see. The appearance. So we've talked a little bit about the reveal. Now we're talking about the clarity and gloss of that surface. And now we're looking at these different levels, and we have a 1 through 4 rating here. And we go all the way, remember how I said that polished concrete does not necessarily mean shiny concrete. And in the definition of polished concrete, it does not say that the concrete needs to be shiny. So you can actually have a flat piece of concrete and call it polished concrete. Satin or honed, polished, or highly polished. These are just different levels of the procedures that we go through onto the slab. All 4 of these are things that would be I would highly recommend you choosing which level with your owner that they are wanting that surface to be. How shiny do they want that surface? Do they want the attention to be on their products in a retail establishment, or do they want their attention on a shiny floor? Maybe they only want a satin floor so it doesn't take away from all of their goods that are on the shelf. And what you're going to do is they're going to write level 1, level 2, level 3, and they're going to put that it will be a satin level. And so all of this doesn't need to be in there, meaning they don't have to put the wording of here, and they don't even have to necessarily use this, or they could. But if then they go back to our glossary and somebody looks up, oh, I'm bidding a level 2 satin, what would they read? They're going to read all of this from our website. And so even just by referencing a level 2 satin or honed, they're going to get a not subjective, but a actual definition of what that means. And that is very, very valuable information. The distinctness of image is one of the things that you may or may not have seen on that slide before. And basically what it's doing is it's a measurement that is talking about the sharpness of the image. So that sharpness of the reflectivity. And that's something that when you're talking to the owner, if that's a very important thing that they have a mirror finish, then distinctness of the image is something you're going to want to be spending some time on. And what I mean by that is not necessarily the level of gloss as in shine, but the level of that our floor is flat and that we've had a maximum refinement in that slab with each diamond, and that's what gives us the DOI. And that DOI, if that's what's important to that owner, that we can see that image clarity, again, that's clarity, not gloss, they're going to want to pay attention to that and specify around that number. Here's a level 1. So again, this is not shiny. So this is flat ground. Both of these are completed floors, and they both are considered polished concrete. Here you have appearance level 2, satin or honed, and you're not seeing a clear image here. It's not crisp, but it is highly durable, and both of these have been densified to rejection. So they're going to be easily maintained, and you can see here we have a satin level coarse aggregate floor, a Class C, and here we have a satin level Class B fine aggregate. So it doesn't matter. You can have a satin level at whatever level of reveal. All of these can be mixed and matched. Appearance level 3, polished, and now you're starting to see pretty clear reflectivity from the fixtures on the wall to the floor, as well as some of the reflectivity here from a cabinet or fixture onto where it's pretty straight. So what that tells me is the floor was maximally refined and it's pretty flat. And then we have this picture here, which, believe it or not, the wall ends here. So everything you're looking at moving this direction is a reflection of the wall, and this is all a reflection of the ceiling. When you're looking at this as a trained eye, you can see is that we have crisp, straight line reflections. What that tells you is the floor was maximally refined and has, odds are, very good DOI. It also happens to, in this case, be highly polished. There are ways to measure the appearance of the floor, and there are meters that many of the CPC contractors use on a regular basis, so they can see how well they are refining the floor as they move and what type of clarity they're really getting. And that's a tool that can be used by their crew members to make sure that as they move from grit to grit, they are going to be able to achieve the expectations that you've put forth. Some of the examples here are the level 3 polish. So again, we're seeing good reflectivity, but not crisp near reflectivity or clarity. This is a higher level, and again, you're going to see that we have some smaller and some larger, but we still consider this a coarse aggregate floor. And one of the things I'd note on this is that those percentages that are listed in the reveal chart, the aggregate reveal chart, are about the entire floor. So if we have 10,000 square feet of a floor, and we're saying that 15% could be either having fines in it or a little bit of coarse aggregate, and it would still classify as a Class A level. What that means is that 1,500 square feet of that surface can have that cream, can have some of this aggregate reveal. And it's not about in each square foot that there's 15%, 85%, and you could measure any square foot across the surface. It's taking the whole project square footage and then taking and looking at the overall square foot that has some aggregate or has some of the fine aggregate reveal. And that's how this can work when we're dealing with joints, because many times there's a joint that curls and there's some aggregate exposure there. That would be something within that 15%, and you could literally measure that joint and take 6 inches on either side, come up with that amount of square footage. It's less than 1,500 square foot, and you do qualify as a Class A. This is a Class C example, and there's a level 2 shine with this one. Class B. It's important that when you're specifying the Part 3 in the polished concrete spec, that we are thinking about the manufacturer's chemicals and what they're going to be used for. Since polished concrete is now very vast, where it's being used everywhere from industrial to churches to people's residence, you are going to want to make sure as an architect or specifier to talk to your manufacturer's representatives, somebody that you trust, or your concrete polisher, and find out what's the best product that they know of to use for that particular environment. Because each environment has its own challenges, and every single product is not really designed to be used in every single situation. So it's something that they do want to look at. In this section, you do want to use densification to rejection, these words. These words will go a long way in order for you to get your durability. Remember that flatter floors also will increase traction, and I use the example of if we reveal that sand and we have all those little starts and stops, what happens is the flatter the floor, the more of my shoe surface will actually be in contact with that floor, and with those small little reveals, there's a lot of traction that we've actually produced. And that's very important for them to understand that polished concrete is a very safe floor. And spill environments. I think one of the things that we still haven't gotten through is chemical resistance in some of the, highly used industrial plants, for example, where they're cleaning with extreme hot water and caustic type chemicals. In those environments, that spill environment, we would not be able to even compete. However, if all we're trying to do is resist against wine or resist against, a daily spill, then we do have a couple different ways to do it, whether it's an impregnator or it's a microfilm forming guard. Concrete densifiers. It's important that you use them. And what this is showing you is that when a densifier is applied, it penetrates in. And this piece right here used to be just as wet as the one next to it is. And it absorbed all into the concrete. And what I want to show you here is this is the end result. These right here, these two on this right half, never got densifier. This and this never got densifier. They are lighter, and they don't have the same kind of richness or almost a little bit of glow like you're seeing here from this light. And the slabs got different amounts of densifier. This is a slab right here, this little strip that got the most densifier applied, and it is the most uniform in colorization. If you look here, there's a little bit of difference in colorization here, and that's due to those areas did not get quite as much densifier as the areas next to it. Densification to rejection will help with uniformity and durability, exceptionally important. And this is just the application, so people can walk on it while they're doing it, and they're basically pushing product and applying product and having it penetrate in and react. And it is reacting with the free lime or calcium hydroxide in that concrete. And this is the explanation. So in regular concrete, we take water, cement, and together during that curing process, it basically makes a CSH gel. And that CSH gel, during that curing process, gets very hard. If you go over here, this is one of the capillaries that we're going to end up filling. This is gel that was done from the actual curing or hardening of that concrete, which was the original CSH gel. What happens is that as concrete sits, there's always going to be, so 28 days, 30 days, 300 days later, 3,000 days later, there's going to still be excess calcium hydroxide that did not react and did not make CSH gel during the original curing process. So what scientists figured out is if you take and add silicate, it's basically taking and duplicating the same process that happened originally, because when the concrete was poured, we're putting silicate with the calcium hydroxide, getting a calcium silicate hydrate, which again is what the CSH is, and we're creating more CSH gel. Now this CSH gel is going to be introduced from the top of the slab. Our dense fire goes in, and these are the reactions. And the more of these reactions happen and happen and happen, when you get to this level, if that's the top of the slab, that would be considered densification to rejection. Very important process. What you as an architect need to know is to make sure it's in your specification. So dense fire will produce harder floors. You will have less wear patterns. It'll be easier to maintain that floor, and your shine retention is going to be better, and you're going to get better clarity and shine from that floor overall. I mentioned some stain-resistant products. So assuming we need to resist whatever may spill on it, usually it's considered a liquid in some form that's going to spill and cause a stain. There's two ways you can go. One is a microfilm forming product, and that will penetrate into that surface, react within the concrete itself, and will also leave a film on that surface. And it's going to leave a very thin film on the surface, and in most of those products it will get high-speed burnished, and that burnishing process is something that's spinning at a 2,000 RPM, and what happens there is that creates friction and heat, and that helps melt that microfilm forming guard and really seals that top surface. The other way you can go is an impregnator, which penetrates in, reacts with the concrete, but does not produce a surface film. So the differences there are, this one, the microfilm forming guards are going to be a little bit better for places, like grocery stores, places that may get a fair amount of spill fairly often, and that there are maintenance staff that are trained to be able to come and mop them up and rinse them and get them dry, so that it really keeps them out and on top. The impregnators are, I would use when there's less likelihood of staining or spilling on a regular basis, and you're more interested in having a surface that is just the concrete without any sort of microfilm on the surface. The other thing is that most of the time microfilm forming products increase your level of gloss, and impregnators will not do that. And if you're looking for a low-level shine, this may be a better idea. Meeting the expectations. Use the CPC definitions and set this tangible expectation. involve the polisher in this pre-construction meeting. And you can use one of your own stories about something that when you're involved, how it saved something versus didn't. And really talk with, it's important that there is communication between the floor placement contractor and the polisher. Using mock-ups, if the architect can install a mock-up with the same mix design and have the concrete contractor come in and do the concrete the same way, and then have us or a polishing contractor come in and show them what the Class B and the level A or level 1 finish is going to be, and then get that signed off on, because that's on actual concrete that's theirs. Protecting the floor, it's a very important thing before the concrete is ground and polished, as well as after the concrete is ground and polished. And some of those things to consider is when you're going to have the polisher come and do that slab, because ultimately concrete is a porous piece of hard material. And so it's important that before we get to it, that people don't spill on it and cause permanent stains, as well as afterwards they don't, because it is actually a complete architectural finish, that they don't actually destroy it. Utilize contractors with proven experience, and one of the ways you can do that is the CPC does have accreditations that they, when our contractors do go through different training programs, and you can call those out. Testing and quantifying. It is possible to, these are really used in the case of figuring out how hard the concrete is, so that's possible for us to figure out. It's possible that if you want a highly clear, a high DOI and high clarity in your particular project, it is measurable. This is one of the meters that can measure that. That same meter can actually measure the haze, which is a little different. It's hard to describe, but there's kind of a almost frosted look to a haze where it looks like you're looking through something a little bit like the lens isn't clean, and then seeing the floor, where the clarity is a different ball game. So there are two different ways that you can take a look at the quality of the floor. And finally, there is a way to do slip coefficient testing. And that is a meter that's shown below. Scheduling installations, there's all sorts of different options, anywhere from 10 days after the concrete placed to after walls are in but prior to finish work. And it's important to really talk about those pros and cons once you get the idea of what this project is going to contain and how fast or slow you're trying to build this out. And we can help you with that. Just let us know some of the different parameters, and we can help you understand what will be the effects on the floor with the other trades and by doing it at different times. This was an existing slab that had many, many bolt holes from another wall. All sorts of walls were in here previously. And it's just kind of interesting because this particular contractor took and filled it with a clear epoxy and put a gold glitter in it because this was a hair salon. And so they basically took those features, those kind of ugly features that would need to be repaired and really would reveal and shown anyway, and made it more of a design feature. Summary of specifying. We need to have you with new construction specify whether it's going to be a burnish, A, B, or C for your aggregate reveal. And again, burnished polished concrete, you cannot get a certain aggregate reveal, and that's why we're listing it there. Specify the appearance. Tell us whether you want flat, satin, polished, or highly polished. And again, these all have definitions in the glossary on the CPC website. And finally, make sure that densifier, hardener, and if you need stain protection that you're using it. And then think about if there are any other parameters that we need to be helping install that floor to prevent any issues. Product selection matters. So this floor has kind of a little bit of a coloration to it. It's a little like a tan floor. And we have a lot of exposure to UV light. So the example here I use is that if the windows are not designed with a high enough rating and there's going to be too much UV exposure to this floor, I would highly recommend if they want this floor to stay tan, that they would actually use integral color rather than dye, topical dye, which is not very UV stable long term. Polished concrete is durable and beautiful. Polished concrete is durable again here in a power plant. And here we're at a saw fifth. Again, very durable, high traffic environment. I believe this is a university. And again, very durable and very decorative and unique in its pattern and shapes. Can take on a lot of different things. Highly reflective and highly decorative. This is an extreme design, but as you see, they can use many colors next to each other, polish the whole thing, and get a very nice reflectivity. And as we're seeing, this looks like it's maybe a fine aggregate reveal because we have little bits of salt and pepper here. And I would look at this as a medium level shine. It's not a high shine, but a beautiful floor. And this is a lower level shine, and again, probably a salt and pepper fine aggregate finish. We saw this one earlier, very uniform in its aggregate reveal. And this is highly specified. In order to do a floor like this, you would definitely need to choose and make sure you have a very talented artisan that also does polished concrete. But really the sky's the limit if you get the right contractor. And again, the benefits of polish: permanent flooring solution, low maintenance, breathable, highly durable and abrasion resistant. It's a good idea to use in high traffic environments. Flatter and smoother floors, so you're going to have things like vehicular traffic. You're going to have less vibration on a forklift. You're going to have less vibration on a golf cart. You're going to have less vibration when you have a chair that's rolling back and forth over it at a desk. So even as something like an office environment. And it's low life cycle cost because this surface will never need to be removed and replaced unless you're trying to completely, and the way you would do that would be completely crush that particular piece of concrete and start over again. And really, the low life cycle cost is such a positive thing for the environment moving forward. Really appreciate your time and attention today. If you're doing or planning on thinking about some polished concrete for any of your buildings or projects coming up, you can contact the CPC. They can give you a list of CPC certified contractors, and we can interface with you on really helping you get a leg up on your project moving forward. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may now disconnect.